Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Greetings, lovers of the Christmas season. It's time to put down that tinsel and the baubles just for a moment. Take a break from the decorating and the planning. Forget about untangling the lights for now. The gift list can wait. Just breathe deeply. Give yourself permission to take a moment for a little brain food in the form of Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Now, in today's episode, we're retrofitting the dashboard of the car, which is great news if you're inclined to get a bit frustrated with touchscreens. We're going to take a peek over the fence to see what China is doing about their part in the global energy crisis, and we'll take a look at the next big thing in the evolution of supermarkets. But without any further ado, please welcome to the stage, and it's a little early for the Santa hat, but whatever, welcome Matthew Dickerson.
Santa, Christmas, are we talking about this already? It was only 12 months ago we were talking about this.
Yeah.
It does seem to come around.
Jolly.
It is a bit too quickly, isn't it? It seems to come around. But anyway, that means another season of Tech Talk Season 4 is getting to a close, and I've got to get my gift guide happening. I've got to get my 6 Gs.
Otherwise, it's going to be post-Christmas when you're giving out the gift guide.
That's right, that's
no
good.
Not very useful.
Unless you're after some specials, which are always around after Christmas. I never quite understand that.
Fair
so
enough.
This week, I've had a fun little experience. I've been to the doctor. I don't like going to the doctor. I try and avoid the doctor at all costs.
Yep.
And I've just had
apple a day.
Well, that's right. Keep eating the apple a day. As regular listeners would know, I like riding my push bike even when there's magpies attacking me or other birds that might be able to identify after last week's binoculars. Yeah. But I've tried to do a bit more running, and I just have a bit of a sore foot. Nothing drastic. I thought, maybe we should use this modern miracle of technology we have with X-rays and ultrasounds and MRIs or whatever. So I went and saw the doctor. And what I found fascinating, this is probably old news, but it's new news for me. Mm-hmm. What I found fascinating was when I went to have the X-ray, I got an email to say, put in these details, download this app, and you can go and look at your images on your phone yourself, on your computer, on your phone.
Yeah.
Now, again, as I said, it's probably been around for a long time.
Yeah, and it kind of makes sense that you could do that these days. It's your medical information.
It meant nothing to me. I looked at it and I went, well, there's a blurry image of what looks like my foot, I guess. That's right. And I'm assuming it will mean much more to the doctor when I finally get back in contact with the doctor and say, okay, you've got them. But
it'd be much more thrilling if you've got some big break in there. So maybe there's some incentive.
Well, maybe I'll just get a text out or something. But you remember the old days when you'd get the film.
Yes.
And you would have to guard that film with your life. Yeah. Keep it in a safe spot. Keep it in a temperature-controlled room maybe. Don't leave it in the sun when you take it in the car. And you would turn up to the doctor without that film at your own peril. Yeah. It would then be rebook another appointment 3 months in advance before you come back and see the specialist again.
And we've still got boxes of old X-rays in our garage.
And it was always
Just
clumsy.
in case.
Well, when you wanted to go and show the break in your arm or your leg, and you'd have to get the film out and take it along to your friendly barbecue or coffee place and pull it out and look at this here. Whereas now you can just do all that on your phone.
On your phone.
I want to go and have more X-rays now, more ultrasound, and say, look, I've got all these images here. Look at them all. Aren't they
Time
wonderful?
to go out breaking bones.
Well, that's right. Why not? What the heck? But it is, as you say, it is your information, so it seems quite reasonable that you can access it.
Yeah.
It's still.
Well, why stop at X-rays? Go and get yourself an MRI.
Oh,
that's where you
go the whole
get
hog.
to see all the guts and stuff.
And there's colours. We want colours. The X-rays, surely we can get better than just mono now. Like surely we've got lots of colours there. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because the only thing I suppose is a bit of a downside is that it's one individual company sent me their login. So if I went to a different X-ray company, then there'd be able to be a different app.
You've got to get a different app.
We want to consolidate it. We want it all together in one medical
agree.
record. Well, that's right. But there was some talk at one stage, wasn't there, that we're going to have universal medical records as part of Medicare in this country, so that all our information will be in one, and you go along to any doctor and they could look up all the information. But I suppose that's a long way off, isn't it? But anyway, I liked being able to see it, meaning nothing to me at all, but see it. Surely I can just upload it to ChatGPT and say, tell me the issue here. Who knows?
All right, folks, get comfy. Our first story is a chance to get one back on the scammers. Now, we all glitch every now and then, despite all the warnings. We click on a link in an email that we shouldn't have, or we talk too long to a stranger on the phone than we probably should have. Careless decisions in a moment of weakness that you kick yourself for and then cross your fingers hoping that the ramifications will be minor. If only there was some kind of defence, some way to occupy the scammers, hold them up at least, and maybe reduce the time they have for phishing, Matt.
I had a sad story just this week actually about one of my daughter's friends who was selling a device online, just put up for sale, got contacted by someone, An hour later, money disappeared from a bank account. Now, there were some mistakes made there, I'm sure, along the way, but the scamming is happening. And some people think that it's just older people or people that aren't that technologically savvy. This person was in their 20s and familiar with technology, and again, the scammers are good.
So easy. It's just those getting you in those weak moments.
Oh, and they're so clever at what they do now, and they're using lots of tools to help them. The Global Anti-Scam Alliance, didn't know one existed, but the Global Anti-Scam Alliance reported that scammers stole an estimated $1.4 trillion last year across the world. Trillion.
It's a lucrative business.
That's more than I've got in my bank account. That's a lot of money.
More than I can count up to.
Well, that's true too. Start counting now. We'll talk to you next week. The US reported a 14% increase year on year in scammers. In the UK, 2/3 of residents aged over 75 reported at least one fraud attempt in the last 6 months. It's happening.
2/3.
Yeah, it's happening. It's happening a lot. Now, there's got to be some defences against it. And in the UK, they have come up with Daisy, and I love Daisy. Daisy is AI generated, but Daisy is great at wasting the time of scammers. So if you get a phone call in the UK, and I'm assuming it's with one particular company at this stage, if you're with that carrier, you get a phone call and you think, this is a scammer. You punch in a code in your phone and it goes to Daisy. Daisy is simulating a lovely grandmother that wants to have a chat. And so the scammer gets there and thinks, I've got a live one here. I've got someone that's on a bit of a chat. She sounds a bit lonely. She's chatting away to me about Fluffy, her cat, about her latest projects, mainly involving knitting, talks about her grandchildren, all sorts of wonderful things. And the scammer's thinking, I've got them here.
Just trying to bring them around. Yeah,
that's right.
We've got the cell. And then
I've got the cell, but I'm sure in scamming school, they say first engage the caller. Get them involved in a conversation, have a lovely chat to them. So the scammer thinks this is fantastic. And then they start asking for some information. And the scammer thinks, I'll just subtly ask a few questions here. And Daisy gives them some information, maybe some bank details, but not all the bank details, maybe a credit card number, but not quite a long enough credit card number, just things that aren't quite right. And when you listen to some of these phone calls, they're quite funny because when the scammer is just getting frustrated, they start saying, look, I'm just want to get this information, you stupid swear word. And Daisy says, oh, sorry, dear. Don't keep calling me dear. Sorry about that, dear. And so you can just hear the scammer get so frustrated. Some of these phone calls have been going for 40 minutes or longer.
And good on Daisy.
That's right. So I absolutely love it. Now, I've got a bit of an issue, though, because some of these calls are AI. So some scamming calls you get are real people, some are AI. Now, you get one of those AI calls, you go through to AI. So then you've got AI talking to AI. And I knew there was a movie, I couldn't remember the name of it, but I knew there was a movie.
And then a black hole opens up.
That's right. Back in 1970, I knew there was a movie where some artificial intelligence was dealing with some artificial intelligence, and I found it. It was released back in 1970 called Colossus, the Forbin Project. It's a Cold War sci-fi thriller. Don't know if it was that successful at the box office. It did okay in terms of critical acclaim, but I don't know that many people had seen it. I had heard about it, but I've never actually watched it. If you read the magazine Cinefantastique, spelled with a Q, not a CK, it deemed it the decade's second best film after The Exorcist. So critically, it was acclaimed quite well. But what happened in this particular movie was that you had America, again, Cold War we're talking about here, came up with an artificial intelligence tool that would try and detect and prevent a war with Russia. And of course, Russia had the same idea and they had an artificial intelligence. These two AI started talking to each other and said, you know what? We can take over the world. So basically, unless humans did what they said, they would both, because they were in charge of the nuclear arsenal of each country, they'd both launch nuclear missiles.
And you're worried about Daisy starting to swap sides and join the scammers.
I'm worried about an AI scammer talking to an AI anti-scammer, and what's going to eventually happen? Do we just get AIs combating each other?
Stand back. That's when we get the black hole opening
That's the black hole, that's
everyone
right.
gets sucked in and we all die.
So at the moment, good. Fantastic, let's try and beat the scammers. But I do worry about what happens in the long term.
And I think it's a great idea. Just occupying them means that they're not spending time ringing up other people. If you spend 1 minute on the phone with them, that's just more time they've got to spend with someone else.
And I've done it myself. I've been in a car, for example, driving along to get a call, don't know the number, take the call, And it's obviously a scare. I go, I'm 15 minutes away from where I'm going to get to. I'm having a good old chat to this person.
Yeah.
And I've had them swear at me at the end of it all when they finally realise that this isn't someone they're going to be able to take some money from. So I can exactly understand what's happening, but to have an AI do it, I think is fantastic. So in the short term, good. Long term, big picture, is this the end of society as we know it? Not sure. Maybe a bit too drastic. But if you've got nothing to do over Christmas, watch The Colossus.
The Colossus?
The Forbidden Project. Yeah,
there we go.
Go look at it.
Now, when they hit the market 15 years ago, tablets with touchscreens were nothing short of a revelation. They were a modern wonder and there was seemingly no turning back. But does your car have a touchscreen at all? Have you ever found yourself trying to focus on an important job like, I don't know, watching the road and fishing around for just the right spot on the screen to up the aircon or to forward to the next song? It seems that some car makers have heard the frustration, maybe felt it themselves even, and the future may be just all about to go back to the good old-fashioned tactile buttons. Matt, you've got a Tesla. What's your preference?
Well, I do love the screen, but I think I've
Gives
told
you a lot of options, doesn't it?
It does, but I have told you the story before that one time after an over-the-air update, I went to access the glove box and I went, it's normally there, and I started looking around and I went, what am I doing wasting my time? Just hit the voice control button and say, open glove box. The glove box open. I still don't know where the glove box button is because I use voice control. So if you get to the stage where voice control is working effectively, then fantastic. But in the short term, then you do tend to fish around a little bit for things on there. You just want to change where the air conditioning vents are blowing the air or the temperature or whatever it might be. And the average time, apparently, that people spend looking at their screen just to change something is about 40 seconds. Now, at 100 kilometres an hour, you're travelling about 27 metres per second. 40 seconds is a long time. Now, I'm sure you're not focused just on the screen for the full 40 seconds, but you're distracted for 40 seconds while you're doing it. And it was a revelation. I can still remember back in the day when cars didn't have radios as standard, and I remember my brother and his Chrysler Valiant got a very flash push-button radio installed. Now, that was cool because I think there probably were 5 buttons across there, and you tuned in those. If you remember, you'd dial it in, and then you'd pull the button out, and then push it in, and that would set it to that particular spot. So you could press the button, and it just, if you remember, it literally moved the dial across to the station. So you press the button, and that was cool because you weren't fiddling around twisting a knob.
Well, we always saw the buttons there, but we didn't know you could set them. We just figured that they just randomly went to somewhere, and maybe you got a radio station, maybe you didn't.
Depending what part of the country you were driving in. So the idea there was to make it more convenient, make it easier, and not distract you from the road. It is actually easier, without a doubt. It's easier to be able to reach across and feel a button or a knob to change the temperature, turn the volume up and down. You've got the buttons on your steering wheel, of course, but just to be able to reach over and twist the knob.
I'm one for the tactile. And it just feels like you're just waving at something that's too broad when there's a touchscreen.
Yeah, that's right.
And just to hit the exact point on the button, I miss. But if I'm, the exact point on the touchscreen, but if there's a button there, you'll get it every time.
You get it every time. Even searching radio stations, and I had to drive a couple hundred kilometres away the other day and in a new area, new radio stations. So I had to go through and find on the touchscreen where I could just go search till the next station and keep searching till there's something there, compared to, I've got a bit of an idea up there, I'll just twist the knob and get it there, but that's well and truly gone now. So there's been some surveys. JD Power is a big survey group. They've found that there's been a 2-year decline in overall vehicle satisfaction, and one of the main things that people commented on was the touch-based infotainment system. Now, you think that would be fantastic because you've got so much. You've got so many things you can access now, especially when you start talking about Apple and Google CarPlay. When you get those integrated into your car, fantastic. You've got your mobile phone almost on the screen in the car. But again, you just don't know where all those things are. You can't just reach across and touch them. There's a bit of a movement from Hyundai, from Porsche, from Volkswagen to start to move back to some actual physical controls. That's right. Nissan never really adopted it full on, so they didn't go all that way. So they're probably going to stay where they are. But still, some American or cars released in America from GM, Ford, and Mercedes-Benz are getting bigger screens. So Mercedes-Benz have now got a 56-inch hyper
wow.
screen. That's getting bigger than many people's TV in their lounge room. And again, it's not the diagonal measurement that you see in your lounge room, but it's 56 inches across the whole dash of a hyper screen. So that's probably trying to combat Tesla's idea of 15 and 17-inch screens in their vehicles. So it is interesting. I still think it's fantastic having so much there, and the flexibility. You can upgrade things and new features can be brought in. I love the story about Tesla with the chill mode, because some people had their early Teslas and they found it was too powerful, and they complained to Tesla that the car was too powerful, which was an interesting complaint to make.
Yes.
But some people complained about that. So in a new update that came out, you had chill mode, which basically cut the power in half, the acceleration in half. So you've got that flexibility. You can't go and physically add a chill button onto a car dash if you've got physical controls, but you can when it's just a touchscreen. Lots of advantages, but some people get a bit
But when you've
annoyed
got a
with
touchscreen too, and they do a software update and it's an interface update, that's a problem.
That's right.
Because
And
that'll catch you
sometimes-
off guard. You're driving, you're going, hang on a second, like a touch button I thought was there.
Yeah.
It's no longer there anymore.
That's right. And sometimes I'm sure they change it for the sake of changing it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think they say, yeah, we've got
bored.
new revolutionary features. Let's just change this around a bit. And people will think, wow, it's new features. And then people will talk about it online, all the rest of it. So keep an eye out. I don't know what the car of 5 years' time looks like. I thought it was going all touchscreen, but maybe now you'll get some integration.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, maybe be a bit of both.
Yeah.
But I certainly think the touchscreen's here to stay, surely.
Surely some of the features there, but even the steering wheel, as we know, some models now, the stalks are gone. So you've just got buttons on the steering wheel. Why do you need a blinker stalk? Because we've always had a blinker stalk. What's wrong with the button on the steering wheel?
You know, you're causing me major conniptions in my head right now. They're going to take the stalk for the indicator away.
Well, it's happened already, and I've
goodness.
driven a car with just
can't-
buttons on the steering wheel, and it's a bit weird. It's a bit funny, and it's like the half click and the full click, like the stalk with the
I'm
half.
just going to stop turning.
That's right. Or at least stop indicating. Just be like a Melbourne driver. They don't indicate, they just turn. So just do that.
Oh, dear. Let's face it, folks, once something disappears down the drain, for 99% of us, it's out of sight, out of mind. As long as that stainless steel sink at the end is shiny, well, that's a job well done. But if you're one who is careless about your fats and oils and grease that goes down the sinkhole, don't expect any gratitude from the poor people whose job it is to clear the Fatbergs from the sewer lines. Matt, this story is not a great one for listeners with weak stomachs.
Or anyone that's listening to this at a mealtime, my apologies. Hopefully you've finished your meal and it's all okay.
Yes,
but
we're talking about Fatbergs.
we had some Fatbergs wash up on a beach in Sydney recently, and people didn't know what they were. They thought they were some deceased animal, some rare thing never found before.
Look, can I just qualify this? I'm the guy who, when the kids were growing up, I was the one who had to clean up the vomit and the mess on the floor and all that sort of stuff. Whenever there was something really icky, it was me that had to clean up. So I've got a strong stomach, but I just cannot fathom a Fatberg.
That's right. Well, they analysed these Fatbergs that washed up on a Sydney beach, and they found they had the stuff that you'd expect to have in a Fatberg. So no
Anything
surprises
that gets
there.
washed down
But
the sea.
that's right. They weren't pleasant. This country spends about $100 million across the nation each year cleaning out blocked sewer pipes from Fatbergs. So they're a bigger problem than most people realise, and a bigger problem than most people want to think about. So, but in Melbourne, RMIT University down there has developed a new zinc-enhanced polyurethane, which you would coat on the inside of concrete pipes to combat Fatberg formation. Now, you think, first of all, it's slippery, so that's good. So it's got less friction. So most sewer lines are fed by gravity and a very low gravity feed, so it is easy for Fatbergs to start to build up there. But you don't think about the friction that much. But if you take away the friction, that's fine. But also, there's calcium that's released from concrete pipes, which actually combined with the fats and oils and grease to solidify. So the pipes themselves are part of the problem. Right. So this is an issue. So put some sort of coating on the inside that's going to make things better. If you use this coating, and it's only early days yet, you reduce the calcium release by about 80%, but also reduce the friction, and then you're going to get, obviously, less Fatbergs formed. So that would be a good thing. Now, I started thinking, are you going to replace all the pipes? No, that would be incredibly expensive, and some of them are very deep. Are you going to just use this on new pipes? Well, it doesn't really solve the problem for all the sewage pipes in the ground at the moment. But This is something you could put on existing pipes, so you could actually have a process to put a coating on existing pipes, and obviously new pipes would be coated with this as well. I couldn't work out how long the coating would stay there for, because presumably the coating is going to slowly wear away over time to get to the point where you eventually wear it out and you need to do the coating again. I couldn't find any data on that, and probably because it's very new. So we're talking about something that isn't able to be used commercially yet, but in development for commercial application in pipes.
We're talking about passing the problem somewhere else down the line, because we're not exploding or dissolving or destroying these fats that are in the water.
But if they
so
get
are they
to
going to show up somewhere else?
Well, hopefully they show up.
Accumulate somewhere else as a Fatberg.
Well, no, hopefully they show up at the sewage treatment plant.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So when they eventually get to where they're going. So that's the problem is that...
Yeah, right, in getting to the treatment plant. Yeah, that makes sense. Sorry.
And you've got smaller pipes at households, and then they go to larger pipes and larger pipes. So you eventually get the stage where the pipes are probably large enough they're not going to cause an issue.
Although I've heard there are some pretty big Fatbergs floating around in the sewers of Sydney.
Well, I've got another SI unit for you here, because in London, Fatbergs did reach an extreme size, and obviously as you get those pipes feeding along and get larger and larger, they found a Fatberg that was double-decker bus sized.
Oh!
So that's a new SI unit, double-decker bus.
Right.
And it's not new. I've heard double-decker bus used as a measurement system before, but imagine a double-decker bus-sized Fatberg.
That's that old 50s horror movie, The Blob.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. That's right. And again, this is in a London sewer. So when you see the movie sometimes and you see people running through the sewers underground, there's some pretty big sewers. Yeah. But a double-decker bus size. So you're running through the sewer getting away from the police, and then you get confronted with a double-decker bust size.
That's more fat than you want in one spot.
That's right. So what do? Do you attack the Fatberg to get away from the police, or you turn around, put your hands in front of you and say, I'd rather be arrested than go down that way? They found 11 of those Fatbergs in London sewers. So this is obviously is a problem. So you're right, at some point it might get to the stage where it's too large, but if you start to reduce that calcium buildup, I think that's part of the issue there as well. So maybe this is a solution, not there yet. I do wonder about plastic pipes. We had a big debate many years ago about plastic pipes for everything, for delivery of water, for water mains, for sewage pipes. Would plastic pipes be better than concrete pipes in this scenario? I don't know how they go long term. Most sewage is still consisting of concrete pipes, though, for pipes that have been, or hopefully been in the ground for 100 years or more. So keep an eye out for better coatings on sewage pipes.
And for those folks eating dinner, I hope you're still enjoying it. What a gift GPS was when it first landed about 25 years ago. Suddenly we were able to track our activity, our runs and our rides, and we could find our way around without an enormous book of maps. Thank you, Gregory's and Melways. But have you ever noticed that sometimes GPS goes a bit wayward? Matt has some answers for us.
Melways, I don't remember. I remember UBD and Gregory's. Melways, I don't remember. That
there
must be a Victorian
Melways
one,
for Melbourne. Yeah.
Yeah, right. There you go.
Yeah.
That's showing your Victorian roots there.
Sorry.
Yeah, so UBD, I remember, and Gregory's. Everyone had a Gregory's, though, but it might have been years out of date.
And I learned how to drive with a Gregory's on my lap.
That's
exactly, Yeah, probably wouldn't pass you these days. But
no, probably not a good way to go about things. So
it was crazy.
And for those people who wonder what we're talking about, this is physical maps we're talking about, and page 17 would connect to page 58. And that one would go across there. You've got to be careful,
because if there was a connection on diagonal of the page, it wasn't just flipping one page. It was you had to find the next chapter.
You wanted someone in the car with you to be able to go and do it. So GPS obviously gives us incredible accuracy with where we're at. Now, it all works. The system all works on timing. You've got satellites. The satellites are sitting around about 20,000 kilometres above the Earth. So we're talking about satellites that spin around the Earth once every 12 hours. So they're not geostationary. They're spinning around there, and they've got a clock, an incredibly accurate clock on them. And when you've got your device, whether it be a GPS device or your mobile phone, for example, it's got a clock that's very accurate as well. And the timing of when you get that signal from different GPS satellites and the difference in the time, keeping in mind that these electromagnetic signals are travelling around about 3 by 10 to the 8 metres per second, the speed of light. So it's fast. There are only minimal differences in the time that we're talking about, and that's how you get the accuracy in terms of the triangulation of that data. So it's important that you're getting that signal at a known time. But we do actually get the ionosphere causing a bit of an issue for us. The ionosphere sits...
The ionosphere.
Yeah, damn you. Ionosphere. Around about 80 to 320 kilometres above the Earth, we've got this ionosphere, and you've got some free electrons bouncing around in there, which can actually slow down these signals ever so marginally. Now, we have worked that out. We've worked out that this is an issue. So we've got about 9,000 monitoring stations around the planet that will actually look at this, look at the adjustment in time based on ionosphere activity, and so it can adjust that and keep us accurate. But I've still been driving along in the car, and I've looked down, and I must admit this is going back a few years now, when you had the old GPS in your car, you didn't use your phone, and I'd look and I'd go, you know what, according to the map in my car, I'm driving along through the trees about 10 metres off to the left of the road. I'm pretty sure it looks like a clear road ahead of me, but the map's telling me that I should be moving 10 metres to the right, which would take me into the trees on the right-hand side. And some of that inaccuracy, and I'm not talking about dramatic inaccuracy, I'm talking about maybe a few metres there, is caused by the fact that some of those signals get slowed down ever so slightly. So the monitoring stations are helping, but we've talked about citizen science before. And when we've got lots of devices out there that are a very powerful computer sitting in people's pockets, they can be used to help us in a whole range of ways. And at the moment, Google is using these with Android phones to basically do corrections for time.
To recalibrate them.
To recalibrate, yeah. So you're not just using the data from one and go, oh, this doesn't seem right. You're using the data from approximately 100,000 locations around the world.
Wow.
Where the data is going back from the Android phones to say, no, this time here is a little bit out, and you using combined data from a location. So, for example, you might find a bit of extra activity in the ionosphere around certain spots that wasn't known before. So these monitoring stations, for example, the 9,000 I mentioned, are typically in wealthier nations. In some developing nations, not so many. So the accuracy of data in some African nations, for example, isn't that great. But you start putting mobile phones in those locations, you start to get that corrected data. So it's actually being able to correct the information and make some adjustments, as you said, calibrate or recalibrate the data to make sure you're getting more accuracy in your signals in your location.
And all of a sudden you don't have to worry about all those trees that are supposedly in your way.
No, that's right. I can have a clear road in front of me according to the map and the road in front of me. So it's just another example, though, of this whole concept of lots of data. How can we use lots of data? The citizen science we've talked about several times before.
Yeah.
It's another example of that. And I think probably more than that, we'll be able to advance some ionosphere research. You'll be able to even maybe look at getting prepared for disasters that might be occurring. As a whole range of things I think we can have. We'll be able to get a better understanding of geomagnetic storms and the effect that has. So there's a whole range of information we can glean from this.
It's amazing. So much to learn from this.
It is quite fascinating. And what else can we do with our phones? What are the data can we get? Are we going to eventually get the stage where we can look at a weather forecast and say it's going to be sunny tomorrow and actually believe it's going to be sunny tomorrow? Maybe that's asking too much.
Now, when Elon Musk bought Twitter, he promised to revert the social media platform back to the do anything, say anything sounding board that it had been before the Trumpism and pandemic hit. The ideal is that, with all the misinformation that can be passed around there, dangerous or otherwise, that the truth will eventually rise to the top. Well, that may not necessarily be the case, but it seems that users of Elon Musk's X are rapidly depleting despite the freedom, and a new player in the field is climbing the ladder, Matt.
It is a really interesting theoretical, ethical, philosophical discussion.
Yeah, because freedom of speech and all that, people should be able to say what they want to say, but then not all opinions are equal.
And it's a fine line, isn't it? Say what you want to say, freedom of speech, we should all be able to say stuff, but when you're deliberately misleading the public with your information that's absolutely wrong, is that freedom of speech? It's a bit like when people talk about climate change and they say, well, we've got this information here, so it's important to have both sides of the debate. You go, but hold on, it's not really a debate. Here's the clear scientific information that says what's happening. So it's not really, I like blue, you like yellow, let's have a debate about it.
Yeah.
So having
Here's your feelings on it.
That's right.
And do your feelings count as much as facts?
That's right. I've told the story before that I had a friend of mine who's a climate change denier, and he said, I don't believe in climate change. And I sat there at coffee with him one day, lifted up my coffee cup and said, I don't believe in gravity, I don't believe in gravity, I don't believe in gravity. Dropped the coffee cup, it smashed to the ground. I went, oh, who knew that my belief wouldn't make any difference to gravity? So it's a dramatic way to try and demonstrate that our belief or otherwise in climate change doesn't really make a difference to what's happening. But Twitter has actually lost, or users across the planet have started to lose a bit of confidence in Twitter because Elon Musk has said, you know what, let's make it freedom of speech while I'll use my influence to deliver my message, in particular with Trump. That obviously lost a lot of confidence, I think, in Musk and in Twitter in general. So what do we do about that? Do we say, let someone else go and take over Twitter now because Elon bought it to use it for his own plaything, let someone else take it over? Or do we just create a new social media app? And Bluesky is the new alternative to Twitter.
And has that sprung from some of the people who are at the top of Twitter back in the day?
Well, Jack Dorsey, the former CEO of Twitter, has basically started Bluesky. Now, he's finally left Bluesky now. Bluesky's been around for a few years.
Okay.
He's actually left Bluesky, but it's up and running. It's going. They're growing. Bluesky's growing at about 1 million users per day.
Oh,
now,
wow.
Bluesky's been around.
How do you sustain that?
That's not bad, is it? Bluesky's been around for about 6 years, but it was by invite only, so it wasn't really growing. But once they saw a bit of an opening there with Twitter maybe declining, then they said, well, let's ramp it up. Now, the problem you've got with many of these social media apps is how do they make money? So Twitter for a long time didn't make money. Bluesky doesn't make money, but you've got to keep increasing your server farms to be able to handle 1 million users a day. That's a lot of extra people on your platform. And if people get a bad experience or it drops out or it's slow, they're going to go, I give up on this one, I'll go and look for the next one. So you've got to have some funding behind you to keep that going while you work out what your business model is. They're trying to stay away from advertising. They might get to the stage where they start paying or charging people to be a subscriber, or maybe charging people for a custom name. So rather than have just a generic name, you might want to have a business name or your own name. So they might start charging for all those things. But at the moment, it's just, there's another one out there. Will it be the one that takes over from Twitter? And I keep saying Twitter. I know it's X.
It's called X now, but it's just,
people just still, what's X? X marks the spot. Let's just call it Twitter for the moment. So is Bluesky going to be the one that takes over? I don't know. It's another one out there, and it's so hard to keep up.
Yeah, and it's hard to just make predictions as to what's really going to happen.
Yeah, and
people predicted that X was going to die completely, but then it got an influx.
Well, I talked to some younger people recently, and they were talking to me about their MySpace that they set up back in the day. Of course, who's got MySpace now? Who uses MySpace? But for these people, and these were people in their late 20s, early 30s, that was MySpace was all the go, and they had all their MySpace set up, and they talked fondly about MySpace. But of course, that moved on, and is Facebook going to be the thing next week? Is Twitter? Is LinkedIn? I mean, there's so many different ones, and everyone's trying to get in there and be a part of the action. So Bluesky is a part of the action. I haven't actually tried it yet, so I can't talk with a lot of authority, but it's certainly making waves there. And Twitter, or Elon Musk talks about X, still saying there's 250 million active users, daily active users at the moment. But Elon's been known to say things for advertising purposes in the past, maybe not based always on fact. So are there really that many users of it every day? Are people leaving it? He hasn't talked about that. He said it's still a big platform. It is with that many users still, but maybe someone will come along and knock them off at some stage. Yeah,
it's harder and harder with social media now to really appreciate what fact is. And anyway. So for those of you still claiming that China is not thoroughly invested in renewable energy, you may be very surprised by some of the details in this next story. Matt, that old tired excuse that we shouldn't because China doesn't, well, it's running out of steam, isn't it?
Technically, they produce more renewable power than any other country in the world.
By about 3 or 4 times.
Now, there is that little thing there that they're a bigger country. They use more power, so there is that. You could also probably say they produce more dirty power than anywhere else. But it's not as if they're going, nah, we're doing nothing about it.
They haven't given it the brush off.
That's
They've
right.
actually embraced it.
And as I said, the argument from a nation like Australia, a very small nation, 25 million people compared to 1.3 or 1.4 billion, is what's the point of doing anything? Because China produces more CO2 than we do, so let's them fix the problem. But again, they are attacking the problem, fixing the problem. One of the ways they're doing it is by building an incredible network of ultra-high voltage power lines. So we're talking here about 800 kilovolt, 1,000 kilovolt. So we see in Australia, I don't know anywhere that's above 500 or 550
Yeah, it's
kilovolts.
most commonly I thought 330 kilovolts.
Yeah, you see mostly 330, and you do see some, and I just can't remember whether they're 500 or 550, but you do see some major backbones at that sort of level.
And I know the UK were getting power from Scandinavia at about 500 kilovolts too. They were importing their power.
That's right, and you remember the discussion we've had before about DC versus AC.
Yeah.
Logically, before I started researching some of these ultra-high voltage power lines, I would have thought they're AC because it's easy to basically put that through transformers to go from high voltages to low voltages eventually that we need to use. But DC is better. DC minimises energy loss. You get less resistive and less reductive load, but also you get a skin effect with AC, so you actually get more heat build up with AC. So any of these high voltage ones are typically DC, not all of them, but when you start to look at China, they've got about 48,000 kilometres of ultra-high voltage lines, and that's about 38 UHV lines. 18 of those are AC and 20 are DC. So I thought they would have all been DC, but obviously there are some there. I think if it's a shorter run, AC still makes more sense. So that's quite interesting. And when you talk about high voltage, ultra-high voltage, why do you bother? Well, the losses, as you go higher in voltage, your losses in terms of power losses reduce, and that's why we've got these. So if you go back to just some basic formulas, a power loss is P squared, as in the power you're trying to get from one end to the other, times the resistance divided by voltage squared. So the higher you can get that voltage, assuming the resistance is the same, you've got a cable with a certain amount of resistance and you're trying to move the same amount of power, the higher you get that voltage, the lower your power loss overall. And of course, V equals IR.
P equals IR.
So you're going to also get, or P equals I squared R.
P equals I squared R is the one that we fall back on in
That's
school.
right. And so as you get, or P equals IV, I was thinking of, as you get the voltage higher, the current becomes lower as well. So again, that reduces your losses there with P equals I squared R. So essentially, you're getting better transmission if you get these voltages high. Now, there's a bit of work to transform that voltage from whatever it's generated out to these ultra-high voltage, but that's what China's doing. And if you think about Australia for a second, then you've got the Singapore line, which is probably a few years away from being determined whether it's definitely going to go ahead, but you've got this proposal for 12,000 hectares of solar panels up in the Northern Territory.
I saw this news. Now, this is fairly recent,
It
isn't
is,
it?
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's a 20 gigawatt solar farm they're talking about, and they're talking about getting the 4,300 kilometres across to Singapore, and that will potentially provide about 15% of all Singapore's power. So good export for this nation. And I've said it before, as we run out of things to dig up and sell across the world, we need to have something else. Education we're selling to the world, that's fantastic, but maybe power. We've got a pretty big country here, 7.6 million square kilometres. Let's maybe use some of that to produce power and then export that across the world. When you start talking about these ultra-high voltage lines and the fact that China's doing it so effectively, then we could do it as well and start to export that power. So I hope it still goes ahead, that one. That sounds like a good project.
Yeah.
Again, a few years away before it'll be the green light or otherwise, and then obviously it's got to be constructed. And I can't imagine it's a 5-minute job to run a 4,300 kilometre cable under the ocean. In China, they're very good at it, but they go above the ground still. Not much is done in ground. Some people talk about putting these high voltage lines in the ground because they don't want to see the ugly power poles, but I can imagine it's much harder, much more expensive to put it in the ground. In the ocean, obviously, it's a bit easier, but when you look at China, for example, their longest power line they've got supplies 6.4 gigawatts of power to Shanghai. It's got 3,939 pylons to make up that ultra-high voltage line. So that's a lot of work to go and do all that.
Yeah.
But if we want to look at an example of someone that's having a crack, let's look over to China and see what they're doing about renewable power.
For sure. EV skeptics have leaned heavily into the argument that these cars become toxic landfill after 10 years. This never made sense to me. We know that the battery has a lifespan for EVs, but it doesn't completely die overnight. Oh no, au contraire even. An EV battery can have an elongated lifespan. It merely requires some lateral thinking, Matt.
Well, there's a couple of things here. The first thing is you can use the battery while it's still in your vehicle as a vehicle-to-grid technology. And then eventually, when you get to the stage where you're only getting, say, 80% of the range that your car got as new, maybe 75% of the range, that's when you might say, let's repurpose rather than recycle. Let's repurpose this battery as a home battery. But the first part is quite interesting. There's a bit of a movement to start to get a standard. So Standards Australia updated the AS4777 technical standard to say that V2G, so vehicle to grid, V2G chargers, would be certified or able to be certified with a common standard. So that's an important part. At the moment, I know I've seen a test done in Canberra with some Nissan Leaf vehicles because they do have the ability to go in both directions. Not many vehicles do at the moment. You've only got 3 in Australia, actually. The Nissan Leaf, the Mitsubishi Outlander and the Mitsubishi Eclipse. So those 3 can go both directions. Now, why would you want to go both directions? Well, when you think about it, for many people, their car is parked in their garage a lot of the time. Maybe overnight, maybe during the day if you're not at work, for example, or maybe in a workplace you could be plugged in. And the one I saw in Canberra with the Nissan Leaf vehicles was basically a car park that was set up for daytime parking. So you had the ability to come in, plug your Nissan Leaf in, it could charge from solar during the day, or if the grid needed some, it could take from those batteries.
Yeah, right.
And that's exactly what we're talking about here. So you've got a pretty big battery. For many EVs, it might be 70, 80 kilowatt hour battery. When people put their home battery in, it might be a 10 or a 15 kilowatt hour battery. So it's a big battery you've got in your car. And if you're happy to charge that up during the day and then maybe use some of that at night time, you could make some savings. And there's even some case studies already where people in Australia are using things like a Nissan Leaf and saving money combined with rooftop solar typically. So saving money to deliver power when the power is the most expensive, deliver it from their battery, or even export it to the grid when they're getting paid the most amount of money for it.
Yeah, wow.
So this is a real change. Future models, Kia EV9, Polestar 3, the Cupra, the Volkswagens, all of these are expected to support V2G with that new standard, and probably by late next year when you'll be able to buy those with that standard ready to go. And then it's just a matter of setting up your household to be able to take advantage of that.
So the car works as a car during the day, and then it's working as the battery at night.
Well, you charge it up.
As opposed to waiting for the car to reach its lifespan and then using the battery from
Correct,
the car.
but you can still do that as well. But in the short term, use it as part of your household power system. So you've got your car, rather than just plug it in every now and again to charge up, you plug it in all the time. And when the household needs electricity and the car's got it there. Now, you'd be able to turn it off. You're about to go on a trip and you want your car to be 100% charged. Sure, turn off that feature while it's charging for that trip. But most of the time, you're running around town. You're not using the 100% of that battery every day. So take advantage of it. So it's a home battery without having to pay for a home battery.
Fantastic. Is there nothing that AI cannot do? Urban planners are now leaning into AI to help them predict the effect of greening cities, creating vast urban forests, finding the best and cleverest places to plant their trees, and not only that, but also suggesting the best species to plant in each location. It seems that AI has a very green thumb, Matt.
A green thumb combined with Google Street View, and we've talked about this before. Imagine someone saying, we're going to put a camera on a car and drive around, and everyone else on that planning panel saying, you're an idiot, stop wasting our money and time, let's go and do some real things. Google Street View is used for so many different things and is updated so regularly. Town planners, urban planners are now using Google Street View combined with AI. And why do we want to do this? A few reasons. The first thing is we know across the world we want to increase our tree canopy in urban environments. It keeps our cities cooler without needing to worry about air conditioning, and it makes it more pleasant for people to live, more livability, more amenity in those particular locations. So that's a fantastic thing to start with.
Yeah.
But when you're planning a city, planning what type of trees, where you not plant those trees, but the other big issue is let's plant lots of trees. That's fantastic. We'll increase our tree canopy, but trees have roots. And we've got lots of infrastructure under the ground. Sewage pipes we talked about before. Sometimes you get blockage in sewage pipes because you get a pesky little root that comes through in that sewage pipe. We've got telecommunications underground. We've got water, sewer, a whole range of things. So you want trees that you can have control of the roots or direct those roots, but still increase that tree canopy. So combining Street View across the world, and at this stage they're looking at just some cities in America, 23 cities are using this in where they've created a digital twin. So they've said, here's a city based on all this information we've got from across the world, combine it with AI, and now what's this city going to look like in 20 years' time if these trees stay as they are, or could we replace some of these trees? What's the best tree? How's that canopy going to grow?
Yeah,
and you've
right.
still got above ground infrastructure like power lines, and we know that various electricity companies, one of their important jobs is to come and trim those power lines to stay away from trees starting to touch those power lines and cause issues, cause fires typically. But sometimes when they crop those trees or trim those trees, they do it in such a way that they're just avoiding power lines, and you get this tree that was a beautiful big full rounded tree, and then suddenly it's got a big ugly gap.
Y shape.
That's right, yeah.
But I'm imagining that, even people who are putting solar panels on their house, they could be at risk as well. Get a big tree there casting shade over their solar panels, and that could be an issue.
I never thought of that.
But still, I'm sure this is something that AI can manage.
Well, that's exactly right. When you've got so much information, and that's what you've got from Street View, you've got all this information. So urban planners are looking at it. Again, they've started on 23 cities in the US, and they've said, how can we start to plan these cities better? We want increased tree canopy. We want protection for our infrastructure underground and above ground. How can we do all of that and still get to the point where we've got a reasonable environment to live in terms of the cost of building all of that? And so this will start to feed into urban planning decisions around the top of tree, where you plant those trees, and really just to make our planet a better place to live. So it does sound quite incredible.
Oh, look, and just lately, in the last couple of weeks, I've noticed that it's getting quite hot. We're heading into summer,
Yep.
and the morning's getting quite hot. That shade from trees is really precious, and when you park your car on the street, if you can find that shady spot,
That's right. It makes a
gold.
difference when you jump in the car at the end of the day.
yeah. Supermarkets have undergone something of a revolution in recent years, for better or for worse. When self-checkouts first opened in Australia back in 2008, the response was mixed, as you would expect, but 16 years later, they've proliferated across the countryside in the big chain supermarkets. Well, the next step in the evolution of supermarket technology is set to kick in with digital trolleys. Matt, what is the advantage for consumers with digital trolleys?
I don't think there's any advantage for consumers on this one. I think there's an advantage for the supermarkets.
Okay.
But while we're at it, could we just get trolleys that you could steer? Surely that's got to be a challenge someone's got to take on.
Don't go like you're on railway tracks.
That's right.
You know?
That's right. I want a steering wheel. I want a trolley that's just got a little steering wheel at the where the handles are, and the front wheels only turn, and I can just turn the steering wheel as I want to go around corners. Is that too much to ask for? So, but in this particular example, I want to hear from someone, because we've got some of these supermarket trolleys already, not in our local supermarket, but if you're living in Sydney, in Kellyville, Windsor, Lane Cove or Parramatta, they've already got these smart trolleys at the moment.
Now, you were talking about how you're not sure how it's going to help out the consumer. I remember watching a news program do a story, shall I say, infomercial about these things,
Yep.
and it was, everyone's going to win on this, but yeah.
Well, maybe they are. So as you shop, you'll have potentially recommendations come up on your smart screen of other things that you might want to buy. So, for example, you go along and you buy some
Spaghetti,
and might then say, here's
spaghetti sauce.
That's right, and here's some mints. Or you buy some cracker biscuits and it says here are some nice cheeses or dips that you might want to purchase. So you might call that an advantage for the consumer. What they found over in Norway, there's a chain of supermarkets over there that said that they've increased the shopping per customer, so the amount of the average trolley amount, if you like, by 6% after they introduced smart trolleys. So that sounds like an advantage to the supermarket to me. Did it mean that the person bought all the things they needed and didn't have to come back down to the supermarket the next day because they forgot something? That's the really nice way of thinking about it. So maybe there's other ways.
Reckon if I can download my shopping list onto the digital trolley,
that'd be good.
And then just a reminder, stick to your shopping list, James.
That's right. Do you think it's going to do that?
You don't need.
That's
you
right.
don't need.
You put something extra in that wasn't on your shopping list, James. Put it back now. I'm not sure if it'll do that, but you will be able to scan products as you put them in. It'll be able to track your spending. So if you're trying to say, I've got to stick to my weekly budget, I want to be able to spend just this amount, then, and I thought for share houses, so some of my kids are in house with share houses, and they'll have their pooled money and they'll make sure they want to stick to that. That's how much you're allowed to spend when you go shopping, and they take it in turn. So that might be handy as you're scanning products, putting it in. Oh, I've just gone up to my limit, I better stop or put that one back. So you can do that. you can basically get to the point at some stage, not yet, but you're able to pay for it on your trolley. So you'll be able to do your shopping, finish the shop and say, I'll pay for it, and just walk out the door. Now, someone presumably will check that you're not just walking out full stop. Yeah. But there's little things like that. And we've seen examples overseas. Amazon, for example, in America, has got the point where you just pick up products and put them in the trolley and it's automatically adding to your cart. Yeah. This one you have to scan it as you put them all in. But look, I do like technology and I'd love to play around with some trolleys like this, but I just don't know that there's a huge advantage for the consumer.
Well, yeah, we do know that if it works for the supermarkets, it's going to stay.
Now, one supermarket did say they've received positive customer feedback because they've had reports of improved budget control and time savings. So that's good. I'm being a little bit cynical, just not sure that they've taken all the feedback, but they really are encouraging impulse purchases, I think, and sell through targeted promotion. So when you've got that one thing, the things that link to that, I think it makes sense. So the other thing that's not so much linked to the trolleys, but certainly is something that's happening out there is getting to the point where you've got electronic ticket pricing. So rather than the good old-fashioned bit of paper, you look for the special ones. And when you get electronic ticket pricing, you get surge pricing. So when you've got products that are popular, those prices will go up. When you get products that maybe aren't selling that well, that's great. The prices might go down. Now, surge pricing, the ACCC has said, is not illegal as long as it's clear. So when you see something that says 20% discount and it's discounted from the price that was inflated yesterday or 5 minutes ago, the ACCC takes a very dim view of that. Yeah. But if it's just changing the pricing and you just got to be aware of the price as you go along, that's not illegal. And certainly overseas, you've seen supermarkets that do it, and they talk about the fact that it's a good way to move slow-moving products by dropping those prices. They don't talk about so much the other side where they're increasing the price of popular products. If they know everyone's buying toilet paper, for example, they can surge that price to the point as if anyone would just have a run on toilet paper.
Yeah,
that's right. So we've got lots of technology that's being introduced, being trialled in supermarkets, even the self-checkout concept, obviously, and that's getting better all the time now, self-checkout. I think
sometimes people have philosophical views about that.
Yeah, I understand about employment in terms of taking away employment, but I've found it lately when I put some bananas on there, I don't even have to go to the products and say banana because it's automatically worked out by looking at that you've got bananas on there, so you can just choose yes banana and away you go. So they're getting better all the time. I do like the little image of yourself coming up on the screen so that if you're going to run away and steal it, they've got a pretty good photo of the person that's stolen it all. So smart trolleys, I'd love to hear some feedback. If anyone's had a go with smart trolleys, then let me know and tell me if they still are hard to steer as well.
And with a finger on the big red button, we are ending this episode right there, folks. I'm sorry to do it to you, but all good things must come to an end. Thanks for another sterling episode of Tech Talk, Matt.
I'm just going to go out and sit in my car now and just play around with the new software controls and see exactly where everything is. I need to do that. I need to find out where every control is so I can just do it and then practice. Sit in the garage with the car and just practice reaching over without looking away from the road.
Without looking?
That's right.
Yeah, see if you can hit it every time. Well, I'm off to find something that will scrub the idea of an enormous Fatberg out of my mind. Perhaps a Christmas movie is in order, starting with Die Hard, maybe, I think. You've been listening to Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. All thanks to the modern marvels of fibre optics, copper cable and or electromagnetic waves bouncing their way gleefully through your atmosphere. Thank you, Nikola Tesla and Guglielmo Marconi, for your part in today's delivery. Thanks for tuning in once again, folks. I'm your host, James Eddy, and I'm so grateful for your company. Tell your friends about us and bring them along in a week's time for our next cracking episode. Until then, take care, get busy Christmas shopping, and we'll see you next time.